Next up for my Siege of Winterfell tier lists is going to be Mono Spear. Now, Spear in Siege of Winterfell is becoming, at the time of recording at least, more and more impactful in the higher level brackets of matches at least, just because of how the meta has shifted a bit more towards Cavalry on the top accounts due to Leila and Senelle having such a bias towards Cavalry, and them being so good paired with Daenerys, who is the best damage dealer in the event. So that, alongside their movement speed, alongside the prominence of Bleed Inf with Wales, causing Cavalry to be a bit more of a popular counter build at the time. Spear is filling quite a nice niche right now in terms of countering those players that are shifting to a bit more of a Cav-focused account setup. Spear is also the best unit type in terms of mid-spender Siege of Winterfell synergy. This is because Jaime has such a good passive effect. His active will actually get use with spear units, and of course his passive stats will also get the benefits in this build. He'll be 180% all spear stats. And what I mean by him having the easiest synergy in the event, there are two parts to this. So one, the only thing that synergizes with Sinara is Daeron. That's far too high budget for most players, so she's out the window. I'm just going to put her in D already for the sake of that. And then there's Leila and Jaime. Both of these can be ran in any troop type build with sufficient synergy due to their passive stats. So Leila has a 35% chance to recast active abilities, and Jaime has a 30% chance to cause normal attacks to crit for double damage. And both those effects are passive for every commander active in her lineup for Leila, and all normal attacks in Jaime's lineup. The issue Leila has is at the mid tier, there just aren't very many high value actives realistically. The best, ironically, is Margaery, who will also be brilliant in this build due to her passive stats actually getting use. But there's just such a big spike up from all these middling commanders up to Gold Daenerys that Leila's synergy is a lot harder to get. And also her dragon skills, as far as Siege of Winterfell goes, aren't too great in terms of strategic skills, particularly when you compare them to the normal attack synergies, which you're going to enable through Jaime. So Jaime, on the other hand, his ability is very simple. You can just visualize it as a 30% chance of doubling the damage of your normal attacks. And of course, your normal attacks are very easy to buff through so many of these things, because any attack stat buff increases it, any normal attack taken debuff affects it, so like Julien, any normal attack buff from the like of Patelo is going to affect this, and there's just a lot of ways to synergize with Jaime. He also has the best synergy with the strategic dragon skills, so the best strategic dragon skills are actually Bleed and Weakness, and I don't mean those synergies, I mean like literally the Bleed and Weakness skills. I don't have them to show them, but you see here Weakness and Bleed. If we swap to the strategic attributes, both of these will be 300% damage coefficients. I believe it's after 5 normal attacks for both Weakness and Bleed, and you can run them both together. And both together, they can then synergize off each other and synergize off other existing attack or normal attack buffs within your build. So something like Bleed, which will scale directly off the normal attack damage you deal, which procs the Bleed. If you have a 300% Weakness crit proc into the Bleed, if you have a Jaime 200% crit proc into another 300% multiplier from Weakness, if you have Patelo active during that crit, for example, with his 90% normal attack increase and 1,800% spear attack increase, you could just keep multiplying things into each other, into something else, into something else, into something else. And with Leila and Sinara, you just can't do that. So Spear actually has the best synergy, and I'd say overall, honestly, the best commanders for Siege of Winterfell. And with the current prominence of Cavalry, I think we could, and honestly should, see a bit of a swing towards a lot more Spear builds in Siege of Winterfell. The most awkward thing about them is they're the slowest unit type in the event. So if I look at Siege of Winterfell's rule set, I know it says it in this somewhere. Is it down in other? Yeah, so here, marching speed. Cavalry is greater than infantry, same as bows, and then spearmen are the slowest. So spearmen are slower than cav, inf, and bows. And this can make them quite awkward to run as a result, especially in a meta with a lot of Mengo cavalry marches, because you just can't catch up with them. But if you're in giant melees, they will be great, especially if you can get on those cav marches, of course. So Annie will be the same in terms of placement as all the other unit types I've gone over. Her stats are middling, her active is decent, but not good enough to quite justify the lower stats with 90% totals. Arslan is okay, you could argue he should go in B. I'm going to put him in C, and this is mostly because he doesn't synergize with Jaime in any way. And there are ways, as I will show, that you can synergize with Jaime even outside of his own lineup. So he acts as the Merrill equivalent from my Cav video. Good chunk of health in his active, good stats. He'll have a role in mid spender and low spender mono spear builds for sure in that second, third spot in the second or third lineups, but he won't be a too high a priority. Arya, same as all the other synergies, bottom tier, bad stats, pretty bad active, just not really worth it unless you're pure free to play. Baelish will actually go in S tier with Spear because of the nature of his passive ability, more so than anything, because him and Jaime together synergize to such an extent, and Jaime is going to be so good in this build. So at gold, Baelish will give 180% increased normal attack damage for 5 seconds. That increased normal attack damage can obviously then crit, and he also has a passive ability that will give you a 40% chance for normal attacks in his lineup to recast, and that of course also synergizes so well with Jaime. Baelish, I would say, is one of the rare commanders in the game mode now, which is probably worth using in spear builds at purple, just due to the synergy with Jaime. It's so strong. Cersei will be C tier. I've gone over this repeatedly about how the 3-second duration on her active just isn't long enough. The skill damage increase you get from her ability is irrelevant because it will never last long enough to go into the next active casting, and that really hurts her. The big issue for spear lineups specifically is there are just so many good alternatives. So Daena also is absolutely incredible, but she is only usable very specifically with spear Jaime builds, realistically. So this 3 will be your best Jaime lineup with a spear build. Having your Lord in this march or a Daenerys march is a bit of a debate, which I sort of go back and forth with in my own head. I'd still say Daenerys is so good, you'd have to go with her, but this 3 together has so much synergy. So these two, I've gone over their passive abilities that synergize together, plus he has normal attack increase, he has spear attack increase. If we then look at Daena, I can actually see what she gives at gold, because I don't even have her unlocked. The active ability is fairly irrelevant, decreases counterattack damage taken by the commanded troops. If you have gold Daena, I don't think you're going to be caring much about counterattack damage, not to any large degree at least. It's the passive ability that we really care about. Each critical hit by commanded troops increases their spearman attack by 1,500% for 5 seconds. So if you run that with Jaime, every crit will boost up your spear attack, even when Daena's active isn't being cast. If you have Baelish there, you'll have more crits through more normal attacks. When you crit, your spear attack will go up, so the next crit will then crit even harder, and it will just keep snowballing and snowballing and snowballing. So this 3 is the second best trio in the game mode behind Dany, Leila, Senelle. You could potentially argue it's better, but I think Daenerys is so ridiculous that you have to let her keep the top spot realistically. But this 3 as a trio is insane. You will want to order them, I would say, probably as this, in terms of active sequencing. So Daena's active is awful, you want her last. Baelish will increase your normal attack damage the most, and then Jaime, and then Daena. Dany next, as I keep saying, she's the best commander in this game mode by quite a distance, with the 6,000% scaling on her active. She is top tier for every single build, no matter what. Drake will be A tier, 180% all stats, very solid active damage, decent defensive buff on that active. In terms of raw value, he's very strong. Gorell will serve a similar purpose to Arslan. Find him, see his active. He is the Chris and Rob equivalent, so his active is pretty bad, just spear defense. It's a decent bit of survival, but he'll mostly be there as a stat provider. You'll want him probably in the 3rd position of your lineups, because his active is just so low priority. Hector is honestly about the same, I'd say. His active I don't think is good. You can find him. So he has 180% all spear stats, which is why he's good. But all his active will do is reduce your counterattack damage taken by 80% for 5 seconds. I think that's a pretty low value active realistically. It will reduce the damage you take a bit, but ideally you'll be headhunting cav marches that are weaker than you in melees, so you shouldn't be taking huge amounts of counterattack damage anyway. Obviously, rarely works out that way all the time, but that is the ideal, and in that case, his active just won't be giving much value whatsoever. But again, as a 3rd placed commander in your active sequencing, the passive stats he'll be providing are really, really strong. Jon is okay in terms of raw value. There's a lot of tankiness built into his active. I'm pretty sure he's going to be B tier for every troop type I do. He's a bit better than this stuff down here, but I don't think he's ever going to be good enough to go into the higher tiers either. His active is better than Hector's, but you're losing 180% spear stats total. Julien is B or A. Honestly, I might put him in A due to the synergy he has with Jaime. So, of course, your top march with your Lord, if you're a mid-spender at least, without Dany, is gonna be probably Jaime, Patelo, Drake, Patelo, Mengo, Jaime, something like that. So that whole lineup is built around having as much normal attack damage as possible, scaling attack stats into Jaime's crit mechanics. And Julien will place a debuff on the target you're attacking, and you'll be attacking your target with all 3 marches due to the grouping mechanic in Siege of Winterfell. And this debuff will cause the target he hits with his active to take 40% increased normal attack damage for 5 seconds. So you can debuff your target and then cause that to indirectly buff the damage of your Lord March with Jaime. So you can synergize into your Lord March with alternative lines, which the other troop types or any other combination in the entire game mode really can't really do. There's also another one that you can sort of do this with, which is Varys. So he has the same effect, but it's 30% instead of 40%, and he has no damage attached to it. I'll put Varys in just the tier below, but you can, through these two, continuously debuff the target you're hitting and just hammer them harder and harder with that Jaime Lord March. And this is why I said about something like Arslan being lower tier, just because he can't synergize into Jaime as well. Because these two really gain a lot of value through that debuff. Kevin, I don't think is good. I certainly don't think he's good when there are such better mid-tier alternatives like this. Leila, the same for all of them. If you pair her with Daenerys, she's great. If you don't, there's nothing here for her to really buff. The only one which you could get potential recasts off, and this is honestly making me change my mind about her ranking, is Margaery. So Margaery has 4,300% scaling on her active at gold. It's a heal that targets 5 lineups. So think Simon before the active rework. I am going to move Leila up because of this, because Marge can bring so many stats to offset the stats which Leila won't bring. So Marge's active is the best behind Dany, So even at the mid tier, if you run Marge, something else, Leila or something, and just keep trying to get recasts on Margaery's heal, that will be a very, very effective strategy in my opinion. Mengo, I've put in B for all the other synergy types. I honestly think he might go up with Spear. I'm thinking maybe I should move Hector down because of this, but on the same note, he doesn't belong in the same tier with these three, so I'm not going to. The reason I'm putting Mengo a bit higher here, one, he has an attack buff on his active, which synergizes with Jaime, as I've said. You can scale that attack into crits and exaggerate the attack a bit more. But the movement speed increase for Spear is potentially more necessary than for the other unit types due to the fact they're the slowest, like I've shown. So for me at least, if I were running a mid-spender Spear build, I would put Mengo in my Lord March with Patelo and Jaime, just to make sure I could keep up with those cav marches a bit better, since you're trying to counter them. And if you're stuck hitting inf marches because they're all you can keep up with, there's no point you running Spear, obviously, because you want to be hitting into your counter. So I would build a mid-tier Spear lineup around this. I'd have my Lord March be Patelo. I'm just going to put Patelo in because I keep mentioning him. Patelo, Jaime, and Mengo together. And then I'd be trying to debuff the lineup I'm hitting with them with Julien and Varys, realistically. I think that's the best way to go about it until you have Dany. If you have Gold Marge, you'll want to throw her in there to get the heals off too. But you can really do a lot with this normal attack synergy. So Patelo, he is the Salma Rhea equivalent for Spear, but he's better in Spear because of the synergy, because of the fact that his normal attack increase and his Spear attack increase, they synergize with each other, first of all. So you increase your Spear attack, but then the Spear attack that's scaling into your normal attacks is effectively being doubled. So he's increasing his own damage, or his own buff, by twice as much effectively. But then that will then be multiplied again by Jaime on his crits. So Patelo Jaime is the best mid-spender synergy in the whole game mode. And you'll be noticing a trend that Spear has a lot more high-tier commanders than the other synergies, or the other troop types. I think before the rework, Bows had the best set of commanders in terms of their actives and buffs and whatnot. You could do a lot of interesting things with low rage cost abilities, like Soren and O'Bane were weirdly good. Now I think Spear has the best set of commanders. Marge is so good, Jaime you can synergize with so easily, Dany you can run with anything anyway. Being able to synergize with your second and third lines of stuff like Varys and Julien. It's just that movement speed part which is a bit of an issue for it, that's all. Miranda will be A tier, mostly just as a passive stat provider. Her active is pretty terrible. You don't want to be hitting infantry. If you're hitting infantry, you want to shift targets as soon as possible, so it's pretty much just Spear health, but 180% all Spear stats is, of course, very, very good. Night King, great active, better than anything in this tier here. The AoE attack nullification, you can visualize just a normal attack prevention alone. It will be 3 seconds in an AoE for 5 targets at gold. The normal attack prevention will be effectively 1500% damage coefficient as a damage swing, since you'll be negating that, plus the counterattacks, plus the skill prevention. So this is such a high value active, which just doesn't read very fun at all because it won't get you elims, but it is very, very good. Raymond is terrible, Sabrina's terrible, Tyrion's terrible. Seg, slightly better Arya. Soren, also sort of a slightly better Arya. It's just a heal with higher scaling rather than damage. Senelle is only usable with Leila Dany, realistically. If you can run Dany, Leila, Senelle, that is an incredible combo and you should run it. But without her, her stats aren't bringing anything, and there just isn't really much for you to use her skill increase on, unless, whilst it's listed as damage, it affects heals too, and then if you get it with Marge, you can scale her heal to be over 10,000% scaling potentially. which would be crazy, but I'm not entirely sure if it works like that. Sansa is solid because of her active, 2,150% scaling in total. For free-to-play spear players, there are very limited options. Like, you'll notice in this top tier, only Mengo is free-to-play accessible. So a lot of these top tier options are just off the board. You can have Mengo, Varys, Arslan, Gorell, Uma, and then you're starting to stretch for options. So Sansa as a chief commander in the third lineup is probably your best option in my opinion, because her active is just so much better than any of the other options, even if she's not going to be providing you any stats at all. Sandor is an A tier for every build, 1,350% active scaling, plus 50% flat damage reduction for 5 seconds. It is very, very good as an active. It's probably the best active listed in this tier, maybe slightly below Night King. And Uma is actually pretty solid, especially for those free-to-play players. She has 350% scaling on a damaging effect and 900% spear attack as a 5-second buff also. Her issue is she isn't awakened at the time of recording. She may well be due to this anniversary event that's popping up in a few days. I'm not entirely sure yet. If you can get the awakening army size for her, she'll be even better. And for sure, if she gets that, she'll be the best free-to-play spear commander for this in a vacuum. Varys would only be better with Jaime as the synergy. But all in all, that is how I would leave it at the end. So run these 3 together. If you're a max account, I would still put the Lord with Dany, Leila, Senelle, even with full spear stats. But there is a debate there, because this 3 together is so ridiculous. It's just, is it more ridiculous than Daenerys' active? Margaery is incredible, her active is ridiculous. If you use her, make sure she is the chief commander in the second or third lineup. You can run Leila with her to exaggerate that heal a bit more. I wouldn't use Leila with anything except Margaery, Daenerys, or probably Sansa. If you're not going to use her with any of them, just don't use her at all. Julien and Varys synergize well in the second and third lines by applying normal attack, damage taken debuffs on the target that your Jaime lineup will be hitting. And I would, for mid spenders, without these F5 commanders to throw in there, I would use Mengo with your Lord just to keep up with the Cav marches a bit better. Even if you're a max account, to be honest, because of the movement speed, you obviously, the amount of damage you do is obviously irrelevant if you can't keep up with anything in terms of march speed. So you could maybe throw Mengo into this lineup somewhere, just because the practical advantages of him may just be somewhat necessary due to spears being so slow in this event. Yeah, all in all, I think that's it for spears.